Welcome to Mick and the Psychic, where we leave no stone unturned as we explore all things outside the apparent physical realm.
There is no intent to teach or make you believe or disbelieve anything. It is just a safe space to listen and explore with us.
So for this next episode, you have permission to open your heart and mind as you join myself and Xzavia on this deep dive into the unknown.
That entered Lovelock Cave, they came across thousands of artifacts. They came across these giant mummies, some of them, 8 feet tall, and a number of these skeletons came out. Some of them still had red hair attached to the skulls.
And we will jump straight into it before the internet completely shuts down and all of our computers catch fire or something else happens. As we try and start this podcast with the great Floyd Wills. A bit of an introduction. He has a bachelor's degree in human development, holds certifications in hypnotherapy, so we can trust him, and neuro-linguistic psychology, which is really cool. His investigations into ancient mysteries have led him across the globe. Some inspiration and investigation close to home, though, led him to write his first book, The Redhead Giants of Lovelock Cave and Other Ancient Mysteries. So I guess we can now throw author in the title there as well, Floyd. So coming to us from Washington State in the US, Floyd Wills, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on, and I want to thank your audience for having me on as well. Pleasure.
Very exciting topics. They'll be very, very happy to hear from you.
Yeah.
Okay, can we start with a little bit of a background of history of how you got into kind of ancient mysteries and that sort of thing first, before we delve into the
What piqued your interest?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the 1980s, there were some really cool programs, TV programs, and one of them was called In Search Of. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It was hosted by the late, great Leonard Nimoy.
Okay, yeah.
And it was a cool show. They had stuff on there about like Atlantis, they had UFOs, they had paranormal phenomenon. I mean, it was just very, very fascinating. And as a kid, I was just captivated by that. And I was always interested in mythology and legends. And I would, be the kid at school that would go to the library and check out books on like UFOs or paranormal stuff, anything I could get my hands on. So it started from a young age that I was interested in the subject. And that carried on into my teenage years. And a friend of mine gave me a copy of von Daniken's book, Chariots of the Gods. Have you heard of that?
Mm-hmm. I have.
Yeah.
Nerd.
It was a very interesting book on his theory on ancient aliens and how he believed, extraterrestrials have been interacting with humankind going back thousands and thousands of years. And I thought it was really interesting how he wrote the book. He asked a lot of questions to the reader, and I was just very fascinated. Like, he wasn't saying like, okay, this is for sure what we know, but he proposed some very profound questions, and I've always had a very curious mind. And from my teenage years, moving later into my 20s and 30s and 40s, I became exposed to the Knights Templar, Freemasonry, a number of different secret societies, and traveled to Europe a number of times to some Templar sites. I got interested in sacred artifacts and saw the Spear of Destiny in Austria. That's supposedly the lance head that pierced the side of Christ. And there's a whole history. Hitler actually was obsessed with that, and he actually possessed that relic for a while. So just a number of different things. And I ended up within the past 7 or 8 years getting really interested in the subject on giants. And I heard a presentation by a man named Jim Vieira. He's a researcher, and he was doing a presentation on giant skeleton discoveries, particularly focused in North America. And he was reading off all these different articles going back from the 1800s all the way into the maybe 60s or early 70s of these anomalous discoveries of large skeletons, some of them 7 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet taller. And I thought, this is just amazing. But I thought, is this really true? I mean, is there something to this? This seems very fantastical. Yes. So I started looking into it myself. and started to compile a folder of all these different articles on these giant skeleton discoveries, and my file kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm like, wow, like I could understand if maybe there were some misidentifications, if there were maybe a few hoaxes, but right now I think there's currently over 1,500 documented newspaper reports on this subject. And what I began to notice in a lot of these reports is there was these strange little anomalies. For example, some of the skeletons had double rows of teeth on their upper row, and some of them had massive jaw bones, some of them had protruding brow ridge, and just these little kind of subtle anomalies. And so I would find consistency in some of these articles with these discoveries that were scattered all over, and I'm like, well, this is saying like they have double row of teeth here, and then over in this state, yeah, they're reporting that too. So
different nodes of information confirming.
Confirming. And this was long before the internet, you know, and that type of thing, where a hoax and Photoshop and all that kind of stuff.
Not just looking up other people's details and copying.
Exactly.
It's not as easy to do. It's still cool, but harder.
Yes. So yeah, the more I looked into it, the more I became very fascinated with this particular subject. And there was one discovery that I came across that kind of became the central story of my book, and that's the story of the red-haired giants. And so this takes place in the United States, in Nevada, in an area called Lovelock. And the native peoples over in that area were the Northern Paiute. And through their oral traditions, they have these tales of these red-haired giants, and they were cannibals. And they were attacking the neighboring tribes and just causing all kinds of havoc. And finally, the Paiutes united with some of the other native tribes, and they waged war on these giants, which lasted for 3 years. And eventually they cornered the last of these giants at Lovelock Cave, and they threw brush in front of the cave, and they lit flaming arrows, and they gave them an ultimatum. They said, why don't you stop doing what you're doing and live like men? Why don't you stop? And they didn't hear any kind of response. And so they shot the arrows and caught the brush on fire and burnt the giants out.
Wow.
And so what was interesting, what captivated me about this story is in 1911, there were 2 guano miners that entered Lovelock Cave, and guano is basically bat poop, and that was used in fertilizer, right? So they were going in to collect bat poop, to make money for fertilizer, for using it for fertilizer. And so they came across thousands of artifacts. They came across these giant mummies, some of them, 8 feet tall. And so they immediately reached out to the local university and reported their finds. And in 1911, there was excavations done there at the cave, and a number of these skeletons came out. Some of them still had red hair attached to the skulls, which is peculiar because there's no Native American tribes that I know of, or anyone in that area, that has red hair. So that was a peculiar feature. The skeletons disappeared. They disappeared, but a lot of the artifacts, over 10,000 artifacts, came out of the cave. There was another excavation done in 1924, and then I believe there was another excavation in 1960. And there was over 10,000 artifacts that came out of that cave, and some of them were very large. For example, there was a large sandal fragment that came out that was made out of tule, which is a water plant, but it was they would make clothing and basketry and things like that. This sandal fragment measured, the measurement, if you were to translate it into shoe size, would be, in US shoe size, would be like a 29, which would be bigger than any foot that I could find on record, like for professional basketball players. I mean, it easily surpassed all of them. So whoever wore this sandal was a very, very large individual.
Yeah.
So there are artifacts that came out of the cave, and like I said, a lot of the skeletons disappeared. However, supposedly some of the skulls, a few of the skulls, ended up in a very small museum in that area called Humboldt Museum. Now, what was peculiar about this is they would never put the skulls on public display. They kept them in the basement in some cupboards. And if you wanted to see the skulls, you actually had to ask to see the skulls, and then the curator would take you down and let you see the skulls. So the skulls, however, are no longer there. They were repatriated back to the Native American tribes, I think, within the past probably 8 or 9 years. So that the skulls are no longer there. However, I have obtained some very good photos in my book of the skulls that were once there. One in particular was enormous. It was huge. And guess what? The upper row of teeth. Can you guess what that upper row
Double
of teeth
row?
looked like? It looked like a double row. It not a
Wow.
complete, but there was what they call in dental terms, I think they call supernumerary teeth, which are extra teeth. So it did have that feature in the upper jaw, and it did have a little patch of red hair still on the skull.
I'm just grossing out at the extra teeth, and they were cannibals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Extra teeth.
Extra.
Which is, and this is really fascinating, because when I started hearing about these anomalies, such as the double rows of teeth, I also heard in some of these accounts of the skeletons having extra digits on their hands, like 6 fingers on each hand. And if you go back to the Bible, in the Bible, there's, of course, many of us know of the story of David and Goliath. Goliath is a famous giant in the Bible. But throughout the Bible, there are many mentions of different tribes of giants, the Amorites, the Zamzumim,
Canaanites. Yeah.
the Canaanites, so there's like a whole bunch of tribes. And there's one particular reference where David and his mighty men were fighting these giants, and there was a giant referenced in there, and this giant had a double row of teeth. And had
6,
guess what?
Yeah, 6 digits. Yeah.
6 digits.
On one hand. Yeah.
On one hand. So I really think that that's a genetic trait of these giants. And I do believe that there is some truth. And I go into my book on a couple of different theories, on the giants. Number one, is there evidence that there were these giant skeletons discoveries made in North America? And there is plenty of evidence. I include a lot of articles, documentation. And of course, the Smithsonian and other institutions say, there's no such thing. But I also provide some articles where they actually tried to obtain these skeletons.
We love interviewing experts from different fields about all things outside the apparent physical realm.
And the one constant is these phenomena are transmitted through energy.
So we sought out and teamed up with Subtle Energy Science
to bring you, our listeners,
energetic encoded technology you can use on your phone, laptop, computer, or tablet,
turning your device into a powerful personal quantum energy tool. Now, we're not the creators, or are we qualified enough to explain it at all, but there is a mind-blowing number of scientific studies available on their website.
We get to try the range ourselves so we can give an honest review. And until the end of April, we've got 20% off The Mystic with promo code MATP-861.
And I love using the Mystic. I love it more than anything else. And I notice it really helps if you want to open up your heart or tune in to a deeper awareness.
Now back to the show.
I was about to ask, is that why they had the skulls downstairs? Because that in the 1920s as well, the Smithsonian was very good at being able to obtain different stuff from different displays and then have them in their own special collections. Is that why they had it downstairs? They're trying to keep it on the lowdown, but
you know what? No one knows for sure, Mick, but that's an awful good reason. If this, small museum thought if we put these on display, it's going to be taken away from us. So we'll just keep them down in the basement. So that's a very good point. In fact, when you think about it, the Smithsonian Institution is one of the biggest, museums in the world. I think they have like 9 huge museums, and they have probably millions of artifacts and skeletal remains, and only a very small percentage of those are actually on public display. Yeah. So imagine the things that they have that we will never even see.
Absolutely. That's pretty amazing.
I'm so new to this. I don't even know half the stuff you're talking about. I'm so educated in this area completely. So I'm just tuning in and just loving everything you're saying.
So I have a question for you, Xzavia. So if you were to actually get your hands on an artifact of these red-haired giants, and you were to put your hands on it, is there a chance that you would get an impression of these people?
I can probably do it without actually having to touch. If I saw a picture or something, or maybe just thinking about what you're saying, what would you want to know?
I would just want to know like
Where would you start? Anything.
anything about these people, like who they
Yeah.
were, like focus particularly on the red hair giants, like who they were, perhaps where they came from. You know, if it was true that they were very you know, not friendly people, obviously by eating your neighbors, I take it they're not a friendly tribe.
Well, when you said they were getting no answer, like so they fired the arrows, that's just because they didn't understand. Like I was just getting that they didn't understand what they were saying. Like
Okay, so there was a communication.
they wouldn't have even heard anything. Like as in like,
Right.
oh, yeah, wouldn't like not understanding English. It sort of even feels like even the sound of I'm getting shown that everything was muffled. So I don't know if anything to do with the ears or the hearing. Like they wouldn't not only understand whatever language I was saying, but it's like they didn't hear completely properly anyway.
Or it's not what they were even calling out, because, you know, history's written by kings, right? It can be the same.
Yeah.
Like we called out,
Exactly.
we said, hey, if you want to live like men,
That's right.
that may not have
That may not have even happened.
Maybe one person whispered it 3 rows back.
Yeah, it's Chinese.
Is screaming and shooting.
That's so true.
Kill them. Don't answer that question, so we're going to kill you anyway.
Yeah, that's so true. Good point, Mick. And the interesting thing is, in the Paiutes tradition, they said that they warred against these giants for 3 years.
Yeah.
So it was a
I
long
don't
battle.
want to let them out again. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long battle, and it also leads me to believe that the story is true and that it wasn't just some myth and legend, because they're actually referring to, yeah, our tribes actually fought this tribe for like 3 years. We battled them, and there was a lady named Sarah Winnemucca from the Paiute tribe. She was the daughter of the chief Winnemucca, who was very influential in that area, and this was probably in the 1800s. And she wrote a book on the Paiutes, and she actually mentions these red-headed giants in her account, and said that they would attack her people, they would cannibalize them, and then told the story of how her tribe finally cornered them and destroyed them. And she said that she even still has a mourning dress with the red hair of these giants attached to the dress.
Oh wow.
Okay. So I can't say this is definite because I'm only channeling and can't promise anything, but this is what I'm being shown. So and I believe we get shown what we have the ability to kind of comprehend and understand. And so I'm sharing what I'm seeing. So in other, I don't know, like you call it aliens or other dimensions or entities or beings that aren't on Earth, there's creators. And I was getting shown that beings are creating and experimenting, and that's why we've had like dinosaurs and all different kinds of things coming to Earth to try to see what works, what doesn't. There's free will, right? Because there's no right or wrong, as in there's no like beings and creators, and there could have been us before we came here as people, like we're just creating and manifesting and making things, and there's no like rules out there in space, or whatever you want to call it, saying that you create one thing is bad and one thing is good. So anyone can create whatever they wanted. And so I'm getting shown that some creators have been like putting things like the red-headed giants or different beings there, just an experiment to play and see what they, stir the pot. Let's stir up some shit. Like, let's see how the humans can handle these guys, that kind of thing. So there's like things in there, and it's like, it sounds really terrible, but just like imagine playing like World of Warcraft or a game like that, and it's like, let's just send our guys to that village to wreck it. Like that's what it feels like. It's as simple as, let's see if we're going to create these guys and get up to some mischief. And it's like the higher beings and the I don't know, I'm not getting the names, like the pure entities that are kind of help guide people of why they want to come to Earth and give them advice. They can't really tell the lower vibrational misbehaving entities not to do that, because they have free will. They can do what they want. So they're just throwing them in the mix to see how it goes and playing with us. That's interesting. That's what it feels like. It's like just for shit and giggles.
Interesting perspective. And in my book, I talk about, I don't know, have you guys heard of the Book of Enoch? Have you ever heard of that particular?
Heard of it? I don't know what it is.
Yeah, there's a book. It was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, some of these ancient religious texts, and they were actually, some of the texts were left out of the canonized version of the Bible. But the book of Enoch really is a backstory for another passage in the Bible, which is Genesis 6. And I'm just paraphrasing this. It said, there were giants in the earth in those days and thereafter, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore them children, and they became mighty men, men of renown.
Men of old, men of renown,
men of renown.
And you've literally, Xavier, just described what some people like to call the Genesis 6 experiment.
Really?
Yeah. Basically, we're looking at, that's why I was kind of smiling throughout, going, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. You're describing where they talk about, the fall and who knows about the rest of the story, because there's a lot of stuff that, what's real and what's kind of just information to help you understand the situation. Not so much metaphor, but maybe just, dimensional metaphor. It might be really happening, just not in the way we understand.
Yeah.
But where they had the angels that did the experiment were then cast below the earth, and who knows if that's a dimensional thing or not. For what they did. But it's interesting because that was all what happened with the original Nephilim before the floods, so pre-flood. But that passage in Enoch is kind of talking about there were remnants after the flood as well. So it's like there's still that kind of thing happening, because there's a lot of genetic, obviously, modification. But it's interesting, you look at the pre-flood giants and enormous, like not the size of maybe the redhead giants, like they're 15 foot, 20
Titans.
Titans, yeah, like the Titans. So they've got these massive ones, and then over the years, by the time it gets to Og and Magog, and then by the time it gets to Goliath was maybe what, 10, 12
maybe.
foot, 12 foot or something like that.
Bloodline was diluted, excuse me.
Yeah, so like they got kind of smaller and smaller, and maybe the poor redhead giants are still cannibals and crazy, but there's only a few of them left and they're all dying out. So that's why they're maybe a little bit smaller, still a lot larger than the rest of the humans. But it's interesting you bring up that, it's like an experiment, funsy experiment. I don't know that it was, I think it was still quite frowned upon.
Yeah, but I'm seeing that they didn't get punished for it. It's they just didn't keep making them, like, which makes sense of why they could just kill them all, maybe they did get punished in some way, like as in you shouldn't do that. But they kept emphasizing when I was explaining that there's no, you're not allowed to do this, and you are, because there's like Earth is an experiment, so go play.
Well, that's interesting. It's very interesting because in the book of Enoch, and Mick was touching on this, basically the book of Enoch talks about a story of a group of watchers, which were angels, and they were supposed to protect humankind. There was a group of 200 of them that came to the earth, and they saw that the women were fair. They were attracted to the women of the earth.
And they were right. You can't blame them. Right?
You can't blame them, right?
The women are hot. What can we say?
What can we say? Even angels have their weaknesses, right?
All right.
And
so don't blame me. I'm no angel. So, I'm sorry, Floyd.
No. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so this group of angels, they made a pact, and they came down. They came down, took human form, and they supposedly interbred with the women. And not only did they interbreed with the women, but they taught humankind forbidden arts that perhaps God didn't want us to know at this stage in our development. But they kind of broke the rules, and they taught us like the arts of war, how to make weapons. They taught us a number of other things as well. And they were punished. In the book of Enoch, it said that God was very angry and sent a great flood to wipe them out, because these giants so the watchers interbred with the women, and the women birthed these giants, which are called Nephilim. And Nephilim is a Proto-Hebrew word meaning fallen ones. And these giants, they were violent, they were killing off the humans, and they were actually drinking blood. And some people speculate that they were some of the first vampires. That's where some of the vampire legends come from, because these Nephilim, they were drinking blood, and then they began to fight amongst each other. But one interesting passage in the book of Enoch, and it kind of takes me back to what you were talking about, Xzavia, is it said they were also corrupting the plant and animal life. And I thought, that is very unusual. That almost sounds to me like some form of genetic
GMO
manipulation or
Crazy.
genetic engineering. What do you think about that?
Oh, sorry. As you were saying that, I just got shown that rather than being punished, they gave them another version of Earth to play with instead, and so they could start again. So the flood and everything, wiping everything out, just like they did like with the dinosaurs, and just refreshing and starting again, because it's going a bit the wrong way of their experiment that the intention that original entities, whatever, had for Earth. They created another version where they could do all that stuff, and that's still going. They could do whatever they want and have them like experiment.
It's like
without,
a dimensional flick. Like that
Yeah,
went bang, and
have that, so-
our Earth kept going this way.
yes.
But there's another reality where they
She would not want to
continue
go to that planet. Ew. Because that, in reiterating why they didn't get punished, just like, okay, fine, you can go play your dumb games over there on that planet, that dimension of Earth, with all that there, but no more. And this one's we've restarted it. So sorry, that interrupted me when you were asking. So what were you asking about at the end?
the food. So they're in these biblical, or
Oh.
I should call them extra biblical texts, because it's
Yes.
like Jubilee, Jasher,
Jasher,
Enoch.
Enoch.
They're
Religious
like
stuff.
these other. Well, they're not religious stuff. They were found, with a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Yeah,
but they were
There's
referenced.
also a book of giants too. There's a book called
The
Book of Giants that we have
But these
fragments.
these were referenced by, like Moses, and like these were referenced by big players in the Bible. So they were kept out
Yeah.
of the canon, but they were referenced by people in the Bible. So they're obviously real and a part of that time. So in that, they talk about the like food was bigger, like, it'd be like 3 men carrying a bunch of grapes for these giants, so.
Well, it's interesting, Mick, because I think you're right. I think the atmospheric conditions must have been different, because in my book, I actually have a section talking about dinosaurs and some really unusual discoveries. And I came across a recent article within the past number of years, and it said, what would happen if dinosaurs were alive today in our atmosphere? They wouldn't live very long, because the oxygen level is different for some of these large dinosaurs. They couldn't survive very long. It would be like they'd be running around on the top of Mount Everest, and their oxygen would be deprived. They wouldn't live very long. So the Earth's atmosphere had to be different at that time. And maybe it was at a higher level, where not only were the creatures bigger, but food, plant.
Yeah.
I mean, you look in, prehistoric books, and like some bugs and stuff that were enormous.
Yeah,
They were gigantic,
bigger than us.
bigger than
Yeah.
us. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think you're absolutely onto something there.
So did they do that too? Were they modifying the food, Xzavia? Or was that just of
It's
that
just how
time?
it was. It doesn't feel like it was modified. It's just how it was. And so wiping out, just changing it up, because Earth is an experiment. Like, and I do definitely, from other things I've been shown in the past, I do believe there's different variations. Like, I can't remember, like 9 or something versions of Earth or something. So we're just aware of the one that we're on. And we're somewhere in the middle of vibration, I believe, from other things I've been shown. So maybe that's why there's that really that one we were talking about before could be like really early on. So imagine if there's 9 versions of the same Earth, and we're somewhere in the middle of evolution and how we're doing, like 4 or 5, and maybe the one we're talking about where they can experiment, do whatever they want, and to keep that energy of the giants and the cannibalism and all that going. That could be like number 1. Well, hopefully that's number 1. There's nothing below that. So imagine how cool, amazing Earth would the number 9 level would be.
Right.
Yeah, that's how I kind of get shown it. So yeah, they might just try and fail and restart, and you just wipe everything out and start again, which could be where the whole all about all the floods and starting again and saving and everyone getting on the boat and all the pairs of animals and just like, let's start again, freshen it up, because not like a punishment, just like let's start again and refresh and try. And maybe when that happens, there's like actually they just showed me when you were saying it before, I was showing when you said about angels coming down in bodies, I got shown like the energy of gods coming down into bodies, and then presenting taller and bigger as well, like Egyptian, you know how they draw and they're always much bigger. God's coming and doing work and putting energy in the earth. Like I was seeing stuff with crystals and maybe doing that work and activating certain things in different points around the planet helps correct or fix or change the energy when it needs to be. But that's why they came down at this time. Oh, it's such a weird, like my brain, I'm getting so much different, so many different kind of messages and explaining. And it's funny because it's showing me things that I've seen before in meditations and they're referring to different images. And I'm like, and they're putting it together. So it's like all coming together saying, well, yes, that's why they were there at the time. And that's why there's that life. I'm seeing like, I'm really bad with names, the Egyptian god with the dogs.
Anubis.
Okay, dog's head.
Yeah, Anubis.
Yeah, doing some work with
the dog,
under a pyramid, and it's active. Like I'm just seeing something get turned, and then something's activating, like a whole channel under the ground's turn, like switching on. So it's like feels like things like that is when they corrected things, the damage that was done. Was confusing the crap out of it. There's so much happening in my head at once.
You broke her, Floyd. Damn.
You broke me. I knew we'd be picking up.
I hope not.
Yeah, I'm gonna start spinning. My head will start spinning around.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear what you were saying, Xzavia, because I also kind of picked up about like earth energies. You talked kind of about like an earth energies
like
and
the ley lines.
The ley lines. That's exactly what I thought about.
Yeah.
And I mean, those people believe those are scattered throughout the world, and a lot of the sacred monuments and sites are on these ley lines.
Yeah.
Did you find, Floyd, when you're looking at this, because obviously a whole lot of different ancient stuff comes up, and I know Egypt, they talked about the golden times where the ancient ones were here, and that's where they have the maybe Xzavia, that's where the gods came down in human form or in physical form or something, but they talk about there's temples talking about the golden era, I think it is, and that's the stuff around the like kind of pre-flood time as well, right, or around that flood time. There's a lot of that. Did you find that in other ancient peoples and ancient mysteries, that it's around this flood time where all this stuff is kind of going on? Is it around the same area, or is it like
I think so. I think
that?
It's a worldwide. Yeah, I think it's worldwide. And you know what you were talking about, Mick, reminds me of the works of Graham Hancock.
Oh,
and
great.
Yeah. And how he talks about he theorizes that about 12,000, 13,000 years ago, a giant comet hit our planet. It broke into pieces and it hit in North America and Europe. And there was ancient civilizations advanced that did exist on this planet. Of course, going through a cataclysm like that, it's going to wipe out a lot of people. Those fragments, these millions of miles of ice cap instantly melting this ice, which would raise the ocean levels 400, 500 feet in a very short time, and you have global flooding. And so his theory is that there were advanced civilizations that they were wiped out. There were remnants of them that survived, and what they did is they traveled the globe and passed on their knowledge to the other cultures. And so they basically left their fingerprints of their existence, and they were basically the mother civilization of Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, and those civilizations.
So you think that maybe like a character like so Mesopotamia, so like Marduk maybe was an actual living being?
I think it's very possible. And early on, I was exposed to the works of Zecharia Sitchin, and some people say, wow, he was right on, and some people call him a fraud, and so there's mixed feelings about him. But I really think he was onto something, and I really believe that the Sumerians talked about the Anunnaki, those who from
Mm-hmm.
heaven to earth came, and they were giants. And you can see in some of the tablets, the Mesopotamian tablets on their clay tablets, these pictures of a king seated on a throne, and he's taller than the subject that's standing before him. So he's sitting on the throne, and he's even taller than his subject. So if he stood up,
and he's showing planets and
yes,
the solar system,
the solar
in
system,
his
when we weren't
hand. He's
supposed to know
teaching them.
that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, there's something to that. There's something to that. I really believe that there was extraterrestrial contact. Now, whether you call them, were they the fallen angels mentioned in the Book of Enoch? Were they the Anunnaki, as Zachariah Sitchin would call them, or ancient aliens like Von Daniken would talk about? But yes, I do believe these beings, whether wherever they came from, they were extraterrestrial in nature, and they came to the earth, and they had interactions and perhaps passed on knowledge to humankind.
So the Bible describes them as, well, I guess religious ones describe them as interdimensional. So it's like an angel coming down. It's not coming from an actual place. Heaven is like, parallel within whatever.
Yeah.
And then you get others that talk about it being extraterrestrial. So it's from another land and another solar system or something like that. What's your gut feel? Is there a combination of both? Or do you have a gut feel that it's maybe dimensional or maybe terrestrial? What do you think?
I believe, my personal belief is, I think it's a combination of both. It could very well be a combination of both. I believe in inner dimensions. I definitely believe that. I believe that the ancients have described portals that opened up and beings that have come out and
I saw Stargate. It was great.
Yeah,
it was a great.
It was
film.
great. It was great. Well, on that subject, in my book, I talk about there's a native tribe called the Anasazi that lived like in Arizona, and they talked about in their oral tradition that their shamans got into the practice of black magic, and they opened up a portal. And what came out of that portal was not something good. It was evil. It was a reptilian. It was a giant reptilian. This reptilian kind of corrupted their whole culture and taught them more black magic. And then there was actually cannibalism that was taking place in that culture that hadn't taken place before. And then according to their traditions, more portals were opened up, and guess what came through? Giants.
Wow.
And they were destroying everything. And so the Anasazi people literally packed up and fled, leaving their Pueblo structures, leaving weapons, leaving tools, leaving food. And some of the first archaeologists that discovered these places, they couldn't figure out, like, well, why? It looks like they rapidly left here. Why would they leave these things and not take them with? But of course, archaeologists would say, oh, it was climate change or whatever, and they had to evacuate the area. So depends on who you ask.
I'm just seeing a dimensional shift hop. Like, they don't need to take the things with them because they can just create what they want. Like, they just went through like a vortex of some kind. Like, see ya. That's how it showed me that with the Mayans as well. Like, they just went, see ya, I'm gone. Like,
out of here.
Changing dimension, or going to another level of Earth or something. Like, let's try another place to play. Just leaving behind all the history and everything for people to go, what happened here?
And is the grass greener on the other side? That's the question.
That's
I always
the question.
think you go through the portal and just go, oh, this isn't good.
Yeah. We ended up on number one with all the, that's scary. Like,
you go through and you're the barbarian giant that has all these horrific, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm horrible. You eat chickens? That's disgusting.
We eat plants. They all have souls. What is wrong with you? We just eat light here. Like, you're disgusting.
You eat mushrooms? That was my best friend. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Wow. So sorry.
All in every living thing. So, and that's kind of how I think about it. You're saying, like, is it ETs and angels? Like, aren't we all like from the same place? Some of us choose human bodies, some of us come down as godlike creatures, some of us present ourselves in different ways over history. So are we all ETs or
EDs
from the same
IDs?
Yeah, we all come from there. So we talk about aliens. It's just, and when people see alien forms, is that just the body or image that they're presenting so they can make sense of the energy or entity that they're seeing?
Interesting.
All the same. That's my opinion.
Yeah, speaking of aliens, in my book, I also talk about the Nazca mummies. Are you
Yeah,
familiar
wow.
with that subject?
Mick might
Uh,
be.
yeah, I
Everything
love
we're talking about.
the
Okay.
Nazca area is so interesting. Please,
It's
yeah.
so interesting, obviously, with the Nazca lines,
With the
giant
lines, yep.
lifts that can only be seen from above, and there's just a lot of strange things over there. There's the elongated skulls over there,
Yes.
and I write about them in my book. But also there's also the Nazca mummies that the discovery was revealed to the public. I believe it was in 2018. And there were a group of tomb robbers, they call them huqueros over there, that make their living pretty much, raiding these burial sites. And there's so many of them there, and then selling the artifacts and the remains on the black market. Well, this particular group of huqueros came across underground caves, and the bodies that they found looked so different and did not look human. And this group of huqueros thought they were so important that instead of sticking them on the black market where they probably could have made a lot of money, they actually gave them to an archaeologist that was working over there in Peru from France. And they told him, they said, we think these are so important to the human race that we need these need to be shown to the public. And there's a number of these mummies. Some of them do not look human. Elongated skull, 3 fingers on the hands and 3 toes on the feet. Some of them have no ears, no nose, no sexual organs. And they've done extensive testing on these things. They've done bone scans, they've done DNA testing, and they have not disproven them. It's not like they've proved like they could have taken animal bones and tried to make these things. They said, nope, there's no evidence. It would be probably impossible for them to do that. And there's elements of DNA on some of these mummies that match no known species on this planet.
Wow. So there's no honor amongst thieves, but there is amongst humans.
Have a bit of
Obviously,
integrity.
Right.
There is amongst humans where we go, okay, you know what, this is a bit rich for my blood. So that's amazing. So they've through all of their studies, they're like, this is potentially a new thing, and it's humanoid.
Yes.
So it's like 2 arms, 2 legs.
Yes, and some of them look very reptilian. Some of them look more reptilian than others. In fact, there's one that has what looks like eggs still in the stomach. They did the scan. Yeah, some eggs, very reptilian. Some of them look very reptilian. Some of them look like a mix between a hybrid between more of a Homo sapien and maybe a little bit reptilian. But
Can I just say, with eggs in the stomach, you do not want to be the security guard working in that place overnight. Can you imagine your mind ticking over? It's like, I shouldn't have watched Alien last night.
I know, I'm just thinking about
it's not good.
My brain's gone to Alien.
Yeah. Do I hear something? You'd be freaking out, wouldn't you?
We should look them up and ask them how they're sleeping at night, right?
God. Hey, they would. This is your next book. Interview with security guards.
I think we're onto something. I don't think anyone's done that before. We'll get.
And you're certified. You're certified in hypnotherapy. You could do like a hypnosis session with it. Okay, this is amazing. Next book's going to be big as well. Okay, I'll see you in your future, Floyd.
I'll get you in on it, Mick.
I'm in. Come on, let me in there. I'll do some hypnosis too. I'll be freaking out. I'll be running. You're on your own.
Imagine
you do that
anytime.
yourself.
Oh man, you're already bailing on me.
I'm a pussy. I'm out. I'll read your book.
Okay, that's
You've
good.
sold 1 copy of your new book already.
All right, so. I love it.
But that's interesting. That see, whenever I hear, and this is me being absolutely honest, I love this stuff, and I think it's really interesting, and I try not to judge. And I hear reptilian, and I'm out. I'm like, okay. Next thing, we've got Hillary Clinton shape-shifting, and then like the eyes, and I'm just like, this is just But where's the basis with these kind of things like the reptilian? Is there stuff there that people have maybe tried to make ridiculous, but there's like a truth?
Running with
I think there's a truth.
Yeah.
I really do. I think behind a lot of this stuff, there's a kernel of truth behind it. And I'm the same way, Mick. Like when I heard like reptilians and stuff before, I'm like, oh man, okay, no more shape-shifting reptilians. And even in my book, I mentioned I have a section on the reptilians, and I'm like, I haven't found any conclusive proof that they're shape-shifting reptilians
Is
were,
this the hardest bit
however,
for you to type? You're like, oh,
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
believe
yeah.
I'm typing this. Yeah.
right,
It's
yeah,
a
yeah,
psychic
but
bit to come through for that stuff.
there
Yeah.
you go. But however, I have come across these Nazca mummies, and some of
Okay.
them look reptilian, and
Okay.
it's something physical. You can see it, you can test it, you can do DNA, you can do bone scans, and that's been going on. And the scientists that are working on these things, they have not been able to disprove the existence of these things. And in fact, I remember watching a video of a bone specialist, and her name was MK Jessie from the United States, and she's looking at these and she's going through the bone scans, and she's going, yeah, there's just no way that like someone could try to throw this together. From what I'm looking here, I mean, this looks authentic. So we have to ask ourselves, like, okay, if these are real, what are they? Where do they come from? Are they extraterrestrials? Do they come from somewhere else? Or are they from the earth, and maybe they just existed here a long time and we just now discovered the species?
Xavier, what do you reckon? No,
Yeah,
it's okay. You don't have to
what-
channel every question.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Like, yeah, it's the fact that like if they've been here for like the whole time, we just didn't know. Like, I feel like it's like, again, it's all like just souls choosing bodies to come here, and like it's like, why would they choose to take on that form to be discovered, like knowing they'll be discovered later? Is it just to pique people's interest to know that there's got to be more? So we're open-minded, and so we're curious and look into things a bit. With the reptilian thing, it's a whole topic. As in, like, you're talking about the shape-shifting and all that kind of stuff. I think people play with those images to try to make it look like the darker, evil kind of people might shapeshift, like, but from what I've been shown, and when I say shown, I mean in meditation or channeling, or when I've asked these kind of questions myself, because if you've got the ability to do it, why don't you? Why not ask? Unless you just really don't want to know. And yeah, I got shown once in meditation that it's like a reptilian energy, or like a darker energy. Sometimes when our soul's choosing the body for the life lessons, sometimes they can be intercepted by like for example, a reptilian, and it tricks them and convinces them to kind of like do their bidding, or a bit of a mission for them when they come to Earth. And they would often choose high profile people that are going to be high profile bodies, like actors and musicians and politicians and people in secret societies like the Freemasons and things like that. And so they'll choose those knowing that that's their choice, so they can like help to infiltrate and put that darker energy and influence on Earth. And it runs down in family lines and things like that. And that's how it was explained to me, which made me really nervous, because I was very my business name is Optimystic Xzavia, and I liked to not connect with those kind of negative energies. And so when I saw this, I was quite taken aback, because I don't usually get shown. So I felt like I was being shown not to be so naive, and to understand that we can get infiltrated. Like some people's souls, before they come here, they do get these negative entities kind of like jumping on board and tricking the soul before they come, and they end up being more susceptible to joining into within groups that don't have everyone's good best nature at heart. And that's how it gets shown to me. It's, they're just tricksters, and then negative, horrible things can happen, and it kind of grows. So yeah, I'm not sure like they're actually going to turn into an actual reptile body while they're here, but it's a whole energy, and so like it takes over them. So that's how it got shown to me. So how much truth's in that, I'm not sure.
That's interesting. You talk about like tricksters, and it seems like in a lot of the ancient cultures, there's always a trickster god, isn't there?
Yeah, everyone.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if
Always a
it
trickster.
present as reptiles in that, but that's what they showed me, that when
Yeah.
it's about reptilians specifically, like what is
Yeah.
that? And it showed me that's what they do.
And don't we have a part of our brain, they call it the reptilian brain?
Do we?
Yeah, we do. It's
Yeah.
called you can look, yeah, it's called reptilian brain. Yeah, it's in the back. It's a very supposed
Cerebellum,
primitive part of our,
Okay.
primitive part of our brain that has to do with survival and with
Oh, right.
instinct. And I talk a little bit about that in my book and say, well, maybe the whole thing with the reptilians is that there's individuals that are definitely they have dark energy, but they are operating more off of the reptilian part of their brain.
Oh, okay. So they kind of might like activate that part in a bit more. It just feels like they're more susceptible to going away that's not for the greater good. Like they've been tampered with.
Yes.
Well, so the part of then you've studied more than I have probably on this, Floyd, but that part of the brain with the flight, fight or freeze response
there's
can
another
actually
F in
grow
there
like
too.
a muscle. Is there?
Yeah.
What's the other one?
Oh, no, when it comes to basic instincts, right?
Yeah.
I think you know where I'm getting at, right?
No, I don't. So if you could just type that in the chat and we could, I love it. So with that part of the brain, it's kind of like a muscle. The more you work out the muscle, the bigger or more dominant it gets. That's the same thing. So you find that with kids growing up, sometimes if they're not shown love or they're in a rough situation, that fight, flight, freeze response becomes far more dominant and physically gets bigger and that behavior gets more dominant as well. So that
and it's very
can actually work that out. Yes. Yeah. Which is potentially what it was like back when we were, living in caves, and that kept us alive and kept us going. And then in civilization, when civilization started in Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates, when life starting as this civilization, that then had to be kind of shrunk down a bit more because we rely on each other more and we have roles. And so it's interesting that you say that. I wonder why it's called the reptilian part of the brain. Like, what do you know why they named it that? Is that?
Yeah, a good question. Good question. But I think, from my understanding, it's definitely the very most primitive part of our brain, and it doesn't operate on emotions like empathy, things like that. It's on pure survival.
Do you think these giants that you're talking about and the other giants that they've come from, particularly in your book, do you think that they had very much, I mean, they're cannibalistic, but how they're described in these biblical and extra biblical texts, they're very much just doing, destroy, conquer. There's not much empathy. Is it an evil thing, or is it just that reptilian part of their brain is just so, like, it's a defect?
Much bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting question that you pose, Mick. It really is. I mean, it could very well be a defect, a genetic defect that's been passed on. If you are going back to if you believe along the lines of these extra biblical texts like the Book of Enoch, then these are evil. I mean, it's the union of a fallen an angel with a human, and it's that intermixing, and they are evil beings. In fact, in the Book of Enoch, it said when these giants were wiped out, that some of their souls still haunt the earth. That they were so evil, these souls still inhabit the earth.
And I think as well, though, how these texts were written in the time, that's how they're explaining and describing what's happening. And whether or not something's evil or not, maybe they're trying to, with the people that they're authoring this text for, explain what's happening in their own way, kind of like
in their own way,
like with Xzavia and channeling now. Like Xavia's still got a human brain. She can't, even if she could get everything from the other side, she's not going to be able to bring it back to us anyway. So it's only what you can
simplify the explanation so it makes sense to me.
That's right.
So much more to it. And maybe I'm only even getting explained to me because I know I'm going to pass it on to the listeners. You can only be given so much information, kind of like how the government probably hides along with all these artifacts and whole alien spaceships and all that kind of stuff. You only get what they think they're ready for.
And I think when it's written, so when these things are written and these holy texts are written, technically they're channeled. So if you believe that they are the word of God, then it's obviously not the word of Enoch. It's the word of God through Enoch, or
Yes.
you know. So I wonder if it's channeled with the understanding that they have for their
At
people.
the time.
Surely there's
Yes.
some empathy for some of the. I know you didn't expect this twist, Floyd, but surely there's some empathy for some of these giants where they're operating on their operating system, and maybe their life is just so chaotic, rah, even though it destroys everyone
That's a
around it.
good point. And in fact, I think they actually talk about that in the book of Enoch, where after these watchers came down and they interbred, they were some of them were regretful, some of them were, and they petitioned Enoch, who was a righteous man, to go before God to forgive them.
Yeah.
So that has to show something, right?
Or at least they got caught.
They got caught and they were trying to get out of it.
You know, I mean,
Yeah,
you know, I've done that when I was a kid too. You know,
Yeah, me
like,
too.
you
I'm
know, when you
guilty.
get caught, you go to the good kid in class and go, "Can you put in a good word for the teacher?"
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't work out so well. But for that Nephilim themselves, like for these big giants themselves, because I guess the giants weren't the angels. The giants were the result of the Genesis 6 experiment that Xzavia explained, even though she's never read any of the books. So
Interesting.
these, I know that's full of, I always give her a hard time. Like, you haven't even read the books. You're not even prepared. She's like, yeah, I don't need to be. She's right. There you go. Proof.
I'll just ask. I'm really lazy.
Yeah, you're fine. No, you're
So-
fine. But it's one of those things, I wonder, where, you know, these poor Nephilim, you know, they didn't choose to be born when they're there, or maybe they did, Xzavia, but in their experience, you know, they're just thrown into it, and they are who they are. There was never any of these Canaanite giants that were heralded as beautiful kings that, you know, looked after their people. There was no reports of
eating the people,
any of them being nice. Yeah, it was all manipulation and war. So, you know, is there room, I guess, for some compassion for some of these giant monsters?
Very good question. You know, I've heard, and I haven't researched it myself. Most of the research that I've done has been on the Nephilim. But I've heard from other people that there were actually tribes of giants that weren't evil.
Okay,
and so I can't really speak on that because I haven't really done much research, but I have been, you know, presented with that hey, not all the giants were evil, that some of them
maybe none were evil. They're just doing what they thought was right. It's like
they thought was
like
right.
us being confused that all of a sudden, if all the chickens started getting angry at us for trying to eat them, and then they turned on us and started throwing spears at us and said, "Stop it." We'd be like, "What's your problem? You're our food. Like, we're supposed to eat you."
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
They could have
Exactly.
been confused.
Shout out to all the vegetarians listening at the moment too. They're loving this episode. They're like, "You're right."
Yeah,
Chickens.
Chickens
Are
I
cannibals.
don't see the difference, but yeah.
So another interesting aspect that I address in my book is not just focusing on the Nephilim, but also too, could these giants just be another hominid species of our family tree?
Okay.
And interesting enough, in Siberia, in a Denisova cave, there was a pretty recent discovery. Where they found it. The archaeologists found a large tooth that was so large they originally thought it was from a cave bear, but after doing DNA testing, they determined that it was a hominid species. They also found a small, like a greenstone bracelet with 8mm holes drilled into it. And so this artifact and this tooth, and I think they found a large knuckle bone. They dated it back like 40,000 years, right? And they said this is a new species, and they called it the Denisovans, named after the area where they found it. Well, I don't know if you heard about this, but I'll write about this in my second book. Recently, a full Denisovan skull was found in China. They call it Homo longi, which means dragon skull.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, and it's enormous. It's like a football. It's one of the most enormous skulls that the archaeologists have let us see. I think there's definitely much bigger ones that they won't let us see, but this one here is shaped like a football. It's like a football, and it has very pronounced brow ridge, and it's enormous. And apparently this was found in China in I think it was the mid to late 30s. there was a Chinese worker. The Japanese had occupied that particular area of China, and he was doing constructing a bridge, and he found the skull. He unearthed the skull and he hid it. He put it in a well. And on his deathbed, he told his children were there, and he's like, I found this skull all these decades ago. Here's where I hid it. So his children his sons actually went and retrieved this skull out of the well. Yeah. And then they turned it over to university. And so this is a recent thing, and they're doing testing on the skull. And they said, look, this is another ancestor to us. And we know that the Neanderthals bred with our ancient ancestors. In fact, they said many of us have Neanderthal DNA in us. In fact, majority of us do. Some of us more than others, right? But also now they're finding with this new species of the Denisovans that there are Denisovan DNA in some populations, right? Yes. And they said, so supposedly our ancestors came out of Africa, I think it was 60,000 years ago. And by the time they came out of Africa, the Neanderthals were already in Eurasia running around, and also the Denisovans were, and they basically said not only were our ancestors interbreeding with Neanderthals, but they were interbreeding with Denisovans. And so it was a heyday. It was like, it wasn't all just kill each other off, war kind of stuff. I mean, make love.
There's a fourth F. As you said, there's a fourth F.
There's the fourth F.
The fourth F. That's got to be your second book, Floyd.
That's got the fourth F.
And it just talks about the whole gene pool of everything. Yeah, that's
the whole gene pool.
Maybe don't do that. Don't take my advice.
No, I don't think so.
Please don't.
I don't think so.
Good.
But
a hard thing would be getting to China to be able to find some of this stuff. So I know that there's been a lot of people that have seen that certain mountains in China thought to be
pyramids,
more pyramids, but there is no access to China for any of this archaeological stuff. China won't let you in, and probably for good reason. They don't trust anyone at the moment. So how is it to find, coming from an Australian? Sorry, guys. But like one of those, is it going to be really tricky to get like what's in China? What's coming out of there?
Yeah, I think that would be very difficult. They're obviously very, very closed off as far as, any kind of discoveries. I actually have a replica skull of the Homo longi.
Oh, wow.
You want me to grab it and show it real quick?
Please. Absolutely. This is great. This is where we need to have the music for the show. Oh wow! This is actually really a shape of a football.
Yes, this is Homo longi. This is just like a replica of what was found in China. It's massive, and you can see it's a football shape. And you can see it's very big eye sockets.
Yes,
huge, man. That's what I have.
Yeah. Xzavia, what impression do you get when you look at this? Or do we even want to go? Do we want to go there?
Well, first of all, it's not a real skull, so it's
not a real skull.
But the intention is there, so
intention, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
It'll probably take me a while to sit there and like
right.
I want to see it next to your own head and see.
There we go. I've got kind of a big head, so I don't know if
you guys don't look alike at all.
We don't. Oh well, thank you. I'm glad.
Just the lack of hair part.
Just the lack of hair part. And also too, in my research on the giants, I discovered other anomalous discoveries of little people in North America.
Okay.
And a very small skeletons. I came across newspaper reports of skeletons being discovered, not much taller than 3 feet and even shorter. There's one particular reference in my book. It's on the mummy that was found in Wyoming. And they called him Pedro. 2 miners were mining, and they blew open the hole in the side of this mountain, and they're tunneling into it, and they see this ledge, and they look up and they see this little mummified body sitting cross-legged on the ledge, and it's about standing up, it's like 14 inches tall, something like that. And so they were stunned. They took it out, and they were debating, like, what do we do with this? And they're like, hey, we can make some money off this thing. And so they named him Pedro. And so they brought him into town and they sold him off. And of course, the doctors were really interested in this little tiny mummy. And they actually did some x-rays on it and determined it had a skeletal structure. It had sharp teeth, and it still had some undigested meat in the stomach. And Native American traditions, I started researching this and looked at tribe after tribe after tribe. And most of the Native American tribes have in their oral traditions, they talk about the little people. And most of them talk about giants.
Wow.
That's cool.
So not a child. So an adult.
But if you had to
Not
tell,
a
like,
child.
bones, like the age or something like that,
Yeah.
like you should be able to tell if it's a child or a fully
Yeah,
grown.
and they could tell too by the dental, by the
Yeah.
teeth. Now Pedro disappeared. He disappeared, and no one currently knows where he's at. So there's like a $10,000 reward for Pedro to show up so they can do some
Horsey.
DNA testing.
Someone's very sneaky.
Yeah.
I was just getting shown as you were talking about Pedro. So I don't know if it's Pedro specifically or the little people, but I just got shown that some of them had wings without bones, like just a vein.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, so just seeing that image, okay.
Interesting. So then do we get into, like, say, for example, the Celtic myths of like fairies and things like that? And they talk about these little folks, and yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think, like, I definitely there's so much, I haven't really dived into that kind of stuff before, but I've seen when I've had clients and stuff, energy of past lives of them being not just animals and things that are of this world that we all see, but other dimensional beings. Like maybe they've all been around, but now they show themselves as like an energy presence rather than the physical bodies, or it's just another dimension. And maybe the veil was thinner, as you hear, like, and maybe people could see them more, but now like they're still everywhere. They haven't gone anywhere, but we just don't all see them because we're.
Oh my gosh.
What?
I'll let you finish, but
Yeah,
it's something
awesome.
you just said. I mean, this is crazy because I was on another podcast show talking about giants and little people, and the host, actually her name's Nikki Anna Jones. She has a podcast on fringe archaeology, and we were talking about the little people and how Xzavia, you were saying something like they were almost maybe interdimensional. Is that what you're saying? That maybe they're around us still?
Vibration that we can't all see.
Okay. So this is what triggered. She said one day she was out in her area. She lives in Texas, and she was walking through a kind of a wooded area. She was with her niece or nephew. And she said, Floyd, I looked over and I saw like this little person, like plain as day. And they were just like working, doing something. And she was stunned. And she looked over at her, I think it was maybe her niece, and said, do you see that? And her niece looked over and it's like, yeah, that's a little person. And then it disappeared. It disappeared. It was, she said it was almost like, yeah, it was there for a minute. And if I remember correctly, and I may not get it correctly, but I thought she said it was like almost like an image. She could almost see through it.
Awesome.
Like it wasn't fully materialized, and it was there and then it was gone.
So I reckon, so there's stories about more sightings of things like fairies and nymphs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
From older times, but that's before we had so much interference. We didn't have as much technology, and I'm just showing like waves and static going through the air, and preservatives and all those kind of things interfering with our pineal glands and all that. So there was way more sightings, and it was much more normal. And so then children nowadays are find it much easier to see things like that in the other dimensions. But as they get older, they're interfered with, as in with the pollution and the foods that we eat and things that aren't clean and natural, and they
all the toxins
grow out of it, kind of thing, because it messes up. And so you being a practicing, say, psychic or channeler, you're more likely to be able to see or sense, or at least feel their presence in some way or another more, like a child would before the innocence of all that's taken away. It's not really the innocence of just being out in the big wide world and having parents telling them they have a great imagination. There's stuff interfering with their visuals. So yeah, they've always been there. They're not like, you just paying a bit more attention, tuning in, eating cleaner, detoxing from EMFs and all that stuff will help you be able to see what's all around us everywhere.
Interesting.
So you
Yeah,
think
very
it's
fast.
that it's a lot of it's the, and I think it's described as calcification of the pineal. So just all of that stuff
Yes.
that goes on, and maybe phones next to your ear all the time.
Yeah. Yes.
Technology, which is great because we get to
It's
talk to
yeah,
Floyd,
awesome.
but
Yeah.
Yeah, we
but
love it for that
there's
reason.
an
But
effect. There's
cleansing
an
it, having
effect.
it, yeah, it messes up. And because back like long time ago, hundreds
We
of years
didn't
ago,
have that.
we didn't have it as much, so we didn't see. We saw more
Mm,
stories from then, and so it's not just folk tales and people are drawing pictures. And where do they all come from? Why are they seeing this? Not, you like you're saying, there's so many stories of the giants and the descriptions and it
Yes.
all sides. Like you can't possibly have that many people making up the same stuff. It just doesn't
Exactly.
make sense. Like, come on.
the
So
story's not that good that it would
deny.
last that many years in that many cultures. You
Yeah,
know,
Yeah,
they could
a
come
good
up with
point.
more interesting stories than a
Yeah.
big flood came, and you know,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah,
that
good point.
why
great
would
a story.
natives draw these pictures, and natives from all different countries around like the world? Why they all draw similar kind of things about beings and
Mhm.
gods and different amount of people with different animal heads and all that kind of stuff? Why would they make it up? So yeah, they just might have had a less interference and they actually had more of a chance to see or be present around. There's the same with maybe spirits and everything could be all around us rather than people just think of looking up into space
Mm.
where the stuff is, but maybe it's all just here.
Particularly the Nephilim soul that wanted to stop this podcast from going ahead. I'm glad it failed and we persisted. Just
Yeah, goodness.
while we're still on this topic, and just with
Yeah.
the little people and the giants, and particularly Pedro being found sitting with his legs crossed, that's very much a spiritual burial of someone fairly important, because you're blocking off the internet connection unstable. Love it.
Yes.
You're blocking off the root chakra. So
Interesting.
it's about the power of the other ones further up. That hence the meditation stance in the first place. But being buried like that shows that he was quite a spiritual figure, or she, whatever.
Interesting.
Was
I
quite
never
a
thought
spiritual
about
figure.
it that way.
And being perched on a shelf like that. So there's something very spiritual about these little people and the giants as well, more so than other people. Is that just us putting spiritual meaning to these things, or do you think that they actually had quite strong spiritual qualities or energies that were worth, I don't know, being wary of or rejoicing or?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question. I think they did have the spiritual energies that you're talking about. I know, especially in a lot of the native tribes, when they talk about little people, they always associated them with having some type of magical power.
Okay.
And some of them were portrayed as being like mischievous, and as long as you were respectful to them, they wouldn't mess with you. But there were other ones that were definitely more evil, and that especially if you crossed them, they would put a curse on you, or they could point their finger at you and it would make you lost in the forest and you would die, or they would paralyze you. So yeah, I think there is like this association of some higher energy associated with these beings.
That's very similar to the leprechaun.
Yes.
I was thinking
Well-
Medusa turning people to stone.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Have you heard of the Flores Hobbit discovery? That was in the early 2000s.
No.
Okay, so we have archaeological proof that there once existed these little people. They call it the Flores Hobbit, and it's on the Isle of Flores in Indonesia. They discovered in Liang Bao Cave artifacts. They found spear points. They found this little skull, and I mean, since then I think they found other remains. This tiny skull. And I actually have a replica of that too, of the Flores Hobbit. It's really, really small. And they, archaeologists, paleontologists were examining this, and they were like, this is tiny. We did the, examine teeth, and this looks like this individual was probably, in their 30s, so it wasn't a child. Wow. And then they were trying to say, did it have like microcephaly? Did it have some kind of genetic disorder to make it 30s. That small? Right.
I mean,
yeah.
If it lived to the 30s, probably not.
Probably not. And so they determined that no, this is not a genetic disorder, that this was another race of hominids, and they named it the Flores hobbit. And they said this species was intelligent. They said even though they had a brain smaller than a chimpanzee, they knew how to make tools, they knew how to make fire, they lived in communities. They said they might have actually hunted Komodo dragons, because they found a Komodo dragon remains in that cave, like they had hunted these things down.
Now, would they know if they had hairy feet?
We do not know if they have hairy feet, but I think J.R. Tolkien was onto something. And, maybe our distant past is a little bit more like Lord of the Rings, right?
Maybe.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not far from New Zealand either. So, it's just, it's a quick plane ride. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Okay.
Love
Wow.
it.
I thought we could go on for another 2 hours.
Exactly. I was just about to say that.
We'll have to save this for the other questions for the next time we catch up, because we'd love to have you back on the show.
I have to say, this has been the most fun podcast show I've been on yet. Not putting down any of the other ones, but
and he's just saying we've only been on 2, but that's it. We're
no, I've been on more than that.
I think so. When you're plugging
about
book,
6 or 7.
Yeah. When you're plugging a book, you're going to be. Yeah, exactly.
It was a good combination. Michael seemed to know a lot about the topics you're talking about, and you got a psychic that's just tuning in and adding in stuff. That was pretty fun.
That's interesting. Yeah, different perspective. Yes, very interesting.
It's great fun, and your book, which people can get from Amazon, or there's other ways of getting it too.
Yes, there's other ways. I am a self-published author, so there's a site called bookbaby.com.
Then we'll go to bookbaby.com, because then you actually get paid.
I actually get a little money, right?
Go to bookbaby.com.
Bookbaby.com, and you can go on their bookshop. And again, the red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave and Other Ancient Mysteries. You can also get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes.
Don't be lazy. Don't be lazy, because we want the second book.
We want the second book. Yeah.
And we want that second book. We need the 4th F to be out in stores. I think it's going to be a bestseller.
And I love that there's pictures and things in there, which is great.
Yes. Yeah, lots of pictures in my book. I love pictures. So there's lots of pictures. There's articles on these discoveries, and I cite all my sources. I tried to write it in a way that was fun, and I included some travel stories when I was over in Mexico, some of these unusual sites that I visited, but I also wanted to leave breadcrumbs for people and not just throw stuff out there. I'm like, this is my source, this is where I got it, please go look into it, explore it even more than I did, so I'm not telling people what to believe. I'm just putting out evidence and letting them make their own conclusions, and hopefully inspiring them to get curious to go look into some of these subjects that we've talked about on a deeper level.
Fantastic. And that's what this podcast is all about, Floyd. So thank you so much, because we love just opening people's minds and helping them learn about some great new topics that they might not have considered before. So I'm sure you've got lots of curious listeners now that can't wait to read your book and go deep dive into some of these great topics. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your fun, energy, and insight and knowledge. Like, you're like a walking encyclopedia for cool old stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, it's been a blast. I've really had a good time. And if you guys ever want to take a deep dive, or, if there's a certain aspect of the book you want to really get into more, focus on the little people or Mick, the reptilians, right?
Yeah. All right.
Wherever you want.
Wherever
you want to go. So there's lots of stuff in it. We just scratched the surface, really.
Big time. We'll look forward to having you on again. Thank you so much, Floyd.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
That's it for another episode. Thanks to our sponsor, Subtle Energy Sciences. Click the link in the show notes to access their full product range of quantum healing technology.
And thank you so much to our Patreon supporters. We're so grateful for your contribution to keep this podcast going.
If you'd like to join our Patreon, you can receive bonus full episodes, early release, and monthly readings and meditations.
We love to hear from you, so please comment on our YouTube channel or email us at mickandthepsychic@gmail.com.
I'm a certified hypnotherapist and timeline regression therapist. If you wish to contact me to explore the source of an issue you're facing, just book a session at hearnhypnosis.com and include the promo code MATP for 10% off. You can contact me on Insta and Facebook at Hearn Hypnosis.
Check out my website at optimisticxzavia.com.au if you feel you'd like to connect with me as a psychic medium, spiritual mentor, or intuitive coach. Include the promo code MATP for 10% discount. You can also find me on Insta, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
We look forward to connecting with you again next time as we attempt to leave no stone unturned.
Bye.
All right, cool. I reckon that should be okay.